The stone-cold bluff. Home game. Everyone tries this one. It's the bluff people picture when they hear the word. No pair, no draw, 7-deuce on a queen-8-3 board, and you bet anyway. You're not betting your cards. You're betting a hand you don't have, and hoping he believes it. The only thing that can win for you is fold equity, the chance he lays it down. Bet half the pot and he has to fold just one time in 3. The catch is the target. Fire this into a player who never folds, and you're lighting money on fire. Ask Chris Moneymaker. In 2003, an accountant in his first live tournament shoved with nothing and folded out a pair of 9s on his way to winning the World Series. You don't need the cards. You need the story. The blind steal, 1-2. Here's the strange part. The cards barely matter. From the button, folded to you, you can raise almost anything, because you're not attacking a hand, you're attacking the 2 blinds sitting dead in the middle. That's dead money. Chips committed before anyone was dealt a hand worth playing. The players left have to defend out of position with whatever they were handed, so most of the time they let it go. You risk 2.5 to win 1.5, which means you only need them to fold about 60% of the time. And against blinds who fold too much, that's every hand you're dealt. The seat is doing the work. Acting last is worth so much that the button raises junk the same way it raises kings. On the button, you're not playing your hand. You're taxing their patience. The continuation bet bluff. 2-5. Now flip the usual instinct. Everyone thinks you bet big to look strong. On the right board, you bet small and bluff more. You raised before the flop, so when an ace or a king rolls off, the story is already yours. That's range advantage, the simple fact that your whole hand range hits this board harder than his does. On a dry ace-high flop, he mostly missed. One small bet, a third of the pot, folds out everything he can't continue with. And because a third pot bet only has to work a quarter of the time, you can fire it with your entire range, your monsters and your total air. The same size, the same board. The old school move was to blast 3/4 pot every single flop. That's a leak now. The board doesn't belong to your 2 cards. It belongs to a range, and on the right one, the range is yours. The semi-bluff. 5-10. This is a bluff with a parachute. You bet a hand that's probably behind right now but can leap ahead. A flush draw, an open-ended straight draw. And suddenly, you've got 2 ways to win instead of 1. He folds now, you take it. He calls, you still hit a third of the time and win later. David Sklansky named this in 1978. And the insight was quiet but enormous. Because the hand can improve, you need far fewer folds than a pure bluff, and you are never drawing dead when called. Combined equity, he called it. Fold equity plus the equity of the draw, stacked on top of each other, which leads somewhere strange. The weaker drawing hand is often the stronger bet, because a made hand only wins one way at showdown, and a draw wins too. Bet the hand that isn't good yet. It has more paths home. The float bluff. 10-25, you win this one by calling. The most passive move at the table turned into the first step of an attack. Here's the gap you're exploiting. Most players fire the flop with air and then give up on the turn the moment they don't improve. So you don't fold when you miss. You just call, position in hand, and wait. When they check the turn and hand you the weakness you knew was coming, you bet, and the pot is yours. It looks like a limp call from a beginner. It's a trap. The field folds to that turn stab around 60% of the time, and a half-pot bet only needs it to work a third of the time. The math isn't close, which is why the biggest winners float far more than the textbooks say they should, because the table folds far too often to a hand that just called and waited. Call now and steal it on the street they surrender. The donk bet bluff. 25-50. This one is named after the donkey, the table word for a bad player. And a decade ago, leading into the person who raised you was proof you were won. Then the solver picked it up and made it a weapon. Here's the twist. On a low connected board, 7-6-4, the player who just called before the flop actually holds more sets and more straights than the raiser, because the raiser would have re-raised his best hands earlier. That's a nut advantage, and it's sitting with the out-of-position player who isn't supposed to have it. So you lead, a small bet into a raiser who missed, on a board that quietly belongs to you. The catch? Do it on the wrong board, a dry ace-high flop, and you've just folded out the very air he would have bluffed off, handing him the pot to save him from himself. The move that got you mocked is the same one the solver now fires 40% of the time. You just have to know which board. The check-raise bluff. 50-100, check to look weak, raise to look terrifying. You're out of position, which usually means you're playing defense. But the check-raise is how the player acting first punches back. You check. He bets his air the way he always does, And then you raise. And now the whole story flips. The hand that looked ready to fold is suddenly representing a monster. That's range pressure from out of position, and it folds out everything marginal he holds. Here's the part that breaks people's brains. The solver doesn't check-raise its biggest draws. It raises the smaller ones, a gut shot with a backdoor flush, and just calls with the huge combo draw, because the strong hand would rather keep the pot small, and the weak one is easy to fold if he comes back over the top. You check your best hand. You raise your worst one. And the balance is roughly 2 bluffs for every value hand, which is exactly what keeps a thinking opponent from ever knowing which is which. The light 3-bet bluff. 100 to 200. Now the bluff carries a piece of the truth. A 3-bet, a re-raise before the flop, screams aces, kings, ace-king. Beginners only ever make it with those exact hands, which is why everyone reads them like a book. The move up is to build the range polarized. Your very best hands and your very worst, and nothing in between. But not just any junk. The best bluff here is suited ace-5, because holding an ace, you're holding one of the cards he needs to have the very hand you're claiming beats him. That's a blocker. Every ace you're looking at is an ace he can't have, so his aces and his ace-kings quietly become less likely, and his fold gets easier. You are bluffing with a fragment of the exact hand you're pretending to hold. 3-bet the ace-5, not the king-queen. The rank barely matters. The card you take away from him does. The squeeze bluff. 200 to 400. Someone raises. Someone else just calls. And that quiet, cautious flat is the whole reason this works. A player who only calls is telling you something. He can't have aces or kings because he'd have re-raised them. His range is capped, the top is missing, so when you come over the top of everyone, he almost never has a hand strong enough to continue. And neither of them wanted a fight in the first place. You squeeze them both between the raiser and your re-raise, and you scoop the pile of dead money they left in the middle. Sizing goes up because there's more to attack and more players to fold out. The irony is clean. The guy who played it safe by just calling made himself the target by doing it. His caution wasn't safety. It was a confession, and the confession is what you attack. The double barrel bluff. 500 to 1,000. You fired the flop and he called. Most players stop there, one and done, and that's the leak. The second barrel, on the turn, isn't about your cards at all. It's about the card that scares him. When an overcard or a card that completes a draw you could be holding rolls off, it slams into the hand you're representing and terrifies his capped range. The one that called the flop with something marginal and now can't stand the heat. You fire the ace, not because it helped you. You fire it because it's the card he most fears you hit. In 2005, Phil Ivey ran this into Paul Jackson at Monte Carlo, both men holding absolutely nothing, raising and re-raising into each other, until Jackson folded 6 high to relentless pressure. Neither had a pair. The story 1. Fire the scare card. Check the brick. The triple barrel bluff. 1,000 to 2,000. Here is where most players physically cannot pull the trigger. 3 streets. The whole stack. On a hand that cannot win a showdown because by the river there are no cards left to save you. 0 equity, 100% story. You've told a consistent tale across the flop, the turn, and the river, and his range is now narrowed to hands that called twice and simply can't call a third time. This is the purest bluff in poker. It can't improve, it can only convince. Tom Dwan is the patron saint of it. In the Durer Challenge, he pushed with 7 deuce, the worst hand in Hold'em, on a Jack-Ace 6-3-3 board, and folded out Sammy George's Ace-6 for 2 pair. On high-stakes poker, he fired his last barrel with Queen 10 and folded out both Barry Greenstein's aces and Peter Eastgate's trips in the same pot. 2 better hands, gone, to a hand that had them beaten by nothing but nerve. By the 3rd barrel, his range is so thin you're either printing money or already dead. The 4-bet bluff. 2,000, 5,000. Take the light 3-bet and turn the volume all the way up. He re-raised you. You re-raise him again, the 4th bet, representing only the absolute top. Aces, kings, ace-king. And your best hand to do it with is, once more, suited ace-5. Why? That single ace does the heavy lifting. It strips his aces from 6 combinations down to 3, quietly telling you the monster he needs is much less likely to be sitting in his hand. That's card removal. At the highest pre-flop stakes, the bet does one more thing. It crushes the stack-to-pot ratio so low that if he calls, he's committed for good. So you don't want to call. You want to fold, and you engineer it before the flop is even dealt. You jam all in holding a piece of the exact hand you're claiming. Light 4 betting was born the moment light 3 betting got too popular. One weapon, invented purely to punish another. The overbet bluff. High roller. Bigger is safer. That sentence would have gotten you laughed out of a card room in 2008, and today, the solver demands it. When your range is split into nuts or air, and his is stuck holding only mediums, a bet larger than the pot 1.5 times, 2 times, puts his bluff catchers in a spot with no good answer, fold far too often, or call at terrible odds. And here's the strange part. Betting more lets you bluff more. A pot-sized bet lets a third of your range be air. A double pot overbet lets nearly 40% of it be air, while giving him worse odds to call. Bigger bet, more bluffs. That's backwards from every instinct you have. The scariest looking bet on the board is the one that protects your bluffs best. Michael Adamo, the most feared overbetter of the era, put it plainly. The solvers say he should use big bets, so he does. It requires a real nut advantage. Bet this big on a board that favors him, and you've simply set fire to a stack. But on the right one, the overbet asks a question no bluff catcher wants to answer. The blocker bluff. Super high roller. The best bluff you can make often holds the exact card that would have beaten you. On the river, equity is frozen. There are no more cards. So nothing matters except the shape of his range. And your 2 cards quietly edit it. Hold the ace of spades on a 3-spade board and he cannot hold the nut flush. It's gone from his range, removed by the card in your hand, which means his story is far more likely to be a miss. And a miss folds. That's a blocker. And it is the most abstract weapon in the game, a play that essentially did not exist before solvers taught players to count combinations in real time. And it flips the intuition completely. A busted flush draw feels like the perfect thing to bluff with. You missed, so bluff. It's the worst hand you can pick, because it blocks his missed flushes too, the exact hands he was about to fold. Holding the card that beats you is the green light. Holding your own dead draw is the trap. Your cards don't make your hand anymore. They edit his. The balanced bluff. World Series, World Champion, and at the summit, the goal changes entirely. Every bluff below this one was trying to beat you. This one isn't. The game theory optimal bluff mixes value and air at a ratio so precise, pulled straight from the size of the bet, that whatever you do, call or fold, you break even. It doesn't try to win. It makes you unable to win. That's Nash equilibrium, the point where neither player can gain by changing anything, and it is the synthesis of the whole ladder. Fold equity, range advantage, polarization, blockers, bluff to value, all balanced at once, in real time. And then the machines arrived. In 2015, a computer named Cepheus essentially solved Limit Hold'em. Its play so close to perfect that a lifetime at the table could not prove it beatable. In 2017, Libertas beat 4 top professionals across 120,000 hands. And in 2019, Pluribus sat down against 5 pros at once and beat them all, trained for under $150 of computing time. But here's the last twist, the one the champions know. Perfect, unbeatable balance also wins the least against weak players, because it never punishes their mistakes. So the world champion learns the unbeatable strategy for one reason above all others, to know exactly when to break it.